If you could click your fingers and everything would go back to normal, would you do it? If you could magically undo all that has happened over the last few months, would you do it? Well, of course we would. Whenever we find ourselves in challenging situations, we want to find a way out of it. However, we know that we can't go back to normal just like that. Perhaps the reality is that we will never get back to normal. Has the world moved on so much that some things will never be the same again? That's what's meant by this new normal phrase that keeps on being shared. Will this new normal be temporary or will it last? Only time will tell. One thing I do know is that I'm ready to move on. I want this all to be over. I'm actually looking forward to this new normal. I'm feeling lockdown fatigue. It's been great to be able to meet up with people outside, but I want more. Technology has been wonderful over the last few months. It's been great to have been able to stay connected through Zoom, but I'm fed up of saying things like, "Can you hear me?" And "I'm going to share my screen now. Can everybody see it?" However, in our desire to get back to normal, I think we need to pause and ask ourselves, what do we want to take with us from this experience? We might want to turn our backs on the last few months. We might want it to move from the present to the past, but what are the things from this time that we should take with us into our futures? What have we learned that we should carry forward? What habits or practices have we embraced during this time that we should hold on to? Instead of just defaulting back to how things were before, how can we pause long enough to see how we can be better for it? Have you noticed how good habits often come from bad situations? You get into debt, and so you adjust your spending habits. You cut back on needless spending, and you create a budget. Or perhaps a health scare encourages you to do more exercise and eat better. People tend to drive more carefully after an accident. And we give more time and attention to a relationship when it goes through a tough patch. But what happens when the situation passes? What happens when your financial situation is back in control or your health improves? We tend to go back to the old way of life, forgetting all the good stuff that was making us better. So what are the good things that have come out of this season that you want to take with you into the next? This will only happen by being intentional. As soon as the new normal lands, we will go back to our old self, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Jesus' brother James knows all about this. James wrote one of the letters that we find in the New Testament. Now, the amazing thing about James is he thought his brother was the Messiah. He thought he was God. What would it take for you to believe that your brother or your sister was divine? A miracle? Well, that's exactly the same for James. He didn't always believe that Jesus was who he claimed to be. In fact, there's only evidence that James realized that his brother Jesus was divine was after he saw him executed and alive again. His brother had been publicly executed and he saw him alive again afterwards. Well, that would do it. Anyway, this is what James has to say about this whole process of being better for it. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may become mature and complete, not lacking anything. You see, James is telling us that it's through these testing times that we become stronger. There's so many cliches about this. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, or no pain, no gain. When we look back on some of the challenges we faced in our past, we can see how we're stronger for them in our present. But do we have to wait for it to be over for us to be better? How can we be better for it whilst being in it? How can we ensure we take the good from the bad without going back to the bad when we're in the good? After all, pain without any gain really is a shame. So that's what we're going to explore together for the next 3 weeks. We're going to drop on a character from history that we can read about towards the end of Genesis. That's the first book in the Bible. He's also got his own film and musical. His name is Joseph. What do you know about Joseph? Well, he had a coat of many colors. We know about Joseph's coat because it played a key part in his story. It was a gift that actually made life harder for Joseph. No, it wasn't because it was a big fashion no-no. This coat was really expensive. It cost a lot of money to make colourful clothing in the ancient world. One bold colour was extravagant. A whole host of them was over the top. This coat was a gift to Joseph from his dad, Jacob. You see, Joseph was the favourite of Jacob's 12 sons because he was the son of Jacob's favourite wife. And he thought your family had issues. Jacob lavished gifts and attention on Joseph, but not on the other sons. Does that happen in your family? Is there favoritism among your siblings? Now, I know the pain of this firsthand. My sister Karen, who's older than me, always got better gifts than my brother and I. Karen got a brand new bike, whilst I got half a second-hand bike. She got a moped and a car and even a new bedroom built, whilst I had to share a tiny room with my smelly brother. But that's all in the past. I'm over it now. It doesn't affect me anymore. Anyway, Joseph, like my sister, knew he was the favourite. Everyone knew it. Jacob would send Joseph out to spy on his brothers when they were looking after the flocks. The fact that his brothers had to look after the animals whilst Joseph got to stay at home is another act of favouritism. Joseph would report back to his dad everything his brothers were doing. Now, it wasn't Joseph's fault that he was the favourite, but that doesn't mean he was innocent. He didn't help himself or his brothers. Joseph had a gift of interpreting dreams. He had vivid dreams and he often shared them with his brothers. Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. That's subtle. What do you think the meaning of this dream could be? How do you think his brothers responded to this? Joseph, that's great. We're so pleased. We look forward to the day when you will reign over us. There's nothing better than being bossed about by your little brother. Now, that's not quite how it went. His brother said to him, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Now, did Joseph learn from this? Did he pick up on how it made his brothers feel or their hate for him? If he did, it didn't bother him because he carried on. Then he had another dream and he told it to his brothers. Listen, he said, I had another dream, and this time the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. Now, Joseph didn't just tell his brothers about this dream. He told his dad too. They all rebuked him for it. Even Jacob told him off about it. And his brothers hated him all the more. Now, one day, the brothers are off looking after the sheep, and Jacob sends Joseph to check up on them. They see him in the distance, skipping down the road towards them in his bright, colourful coat. What goes through their mind as they see him? What would go through your mind? Oh, joy, here comes our dear brother to check up on us. No. Here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we will see what comes of his dreams. And you thought that you argued with your siblings. This is an extreme response that partly shows the brutality of the world in which they were living. It also shows the level of hatred that they had for their brother. I don't think it's the coat or that he's the favourite that they're so cross with. I think it's that he lorded it over them and he looked down on his brothers. But even so, this is an extreme response. So as Joseph approaches, they attack him. They strip him of his coat and they throw him into one of the wells whilst they consider what to do with him. Now, this is what Genesis tells us happens next. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. So they've just thrown their brother into a pit and they're considering killing him. So they sit down to eat dinner. I've had my fair share of battles with my siblings, but we would never do anything as cold as this. Well, maybe my brother would, but anyway. Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? At last, Judah comes to his senses. He realizes that they can't do such a thing. Things are finally looking up for Joseph. Judah continues, come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. His brothers agreed. Oh, so Judah means they won't gain anything by killing him. If they sell him, then at least they'll get some money. After all, he is their brother. So the brothers agree. Joseph is sold to the traders and they take him off to Egypt. He's gone from being the favourite son to being a slave in an instant. That's how quick life can change. One moment, everything is normal, and then all of a sudden, everything has changed. Have you had an experience like that? Have you found your life turned upside down in an instant? The brothers kill an animal and dip Joseph's coat in it. They take it back to Jacob and tell him that he was killed by a ferocious animal. And Joseph is heartbroken. His life is turned upside down in that moment too. This chapter of Genesis and this chapter of Joseph's life ends like this. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. How happy do you think Joseph is about all of this? He's lost his identity, his family, and his freedom. Life was relatively easy for him up until this point, but it's about to get a whole lot harder. This story does have a happy ending, but there's a long way to go before that arrives. What we will see as we continue to journey with Joseph is that this experience will be the making of him, that from it something good will come for him, his family, the nation of Israel, and ultimately the entire world. Joseph really will be better for it when he comes out the other side. If you gave Joseph the chance to undo what has happened to him as he became a slave, do you think he would have taken it? Of course he would have. If you gave him that choice at the end of the story, would he have taken it? I don't think so. It's okay to want to get out of the challenging moments we face in life, but we can't get out of them by looking backwards. We can't get through those difficult moments by wishing things would go back to how they were before. Life doesn't work that way. There isn't a Control-Z option. We can't undo what's happened. Whether it's our fault or not, what's happened has happened. We can't go back. We can only go forward. So when disaster hits, there's no going back. There is no normal. Everything changes. All we can do is find a way to live in the new normal. But we don't have to settle with just surviving. We don't have to settle with just riding out and getting through to the other side. When disaster hits, we can be better for it. I'm sure you want life to get back to normal or start living in the new normal. But I want you to consider today is in your rush to get out of this situation, is there a danger that you could miss out on what is happening now? Don't be too quick to get back to the new normal that you miss what God is doing in this season. Don't move on too quickly without asking yourself how you can be better for it. Don't be in such a hurry to get out of the bad and back to the good that you let go of all the good you have discovered in the bad and go back to doing the bad in the good. Don't be in a rush to let go of the good habits you have formed in this difficult season. Take them with you and allow them to be part of your new normal. There's been so much pain over the last few months. Unfortunately, that pain will continue into our future. One thing I love about God is nothing is wasted. One of my favorite verses in the Bible is found in one of the most amazing chapters in the Bible, Romans chapter 8. If you've never read it, go and read it for yourself. Just Google it, or better still, download the YouVersion Bible app. It simply says this: in all things, God works for the good of those who love him. In all things, nothing is wasted. We could spend all our energy wondering why this has happened. We could spend all our energy wishing we could go back, but we can't. We can only go forward. My hope, my experience is that when we go forward through times like this with God, we come out the other side better. We're going to be different as a result of this experience. The key question is, are we going to be better? How can we ensure we take the good from the bad without going back to the bad when we're in the good?
You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Who am I that the highest king would welcome me? I was lost, but he brought me in. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me. Who the sun sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Free at last, he you.